Great to see you. Got Georgia here at Williams-Brice on Saturday, 3:39 kick on CBS. Certainly looking forward to that. Got great respect for Coach Smart and his staff and almost those guys, and they do a fantastic job. They got a really good football team with a bunch of good players, a bunch of guys that played for a national championship last year, and that experience certainly is benefiting them moving forward. So we're looking forward to it. We got a good start today in practice. We need to finish the week in our preparation for a very good Georgia football team. I would go over their depth chart and all, but they didn't send us one, so I guess I can cover it if you guys ask me questions. Injury report, K.C. Crosby's good to go. He practiced today. DJ Warnham did not practice today, but I expect him to practice tomorrow. Chavis Dawkins is probably questionable, but I would say more doubtful. And Mon Denson will play. So that's it, and I'll open up for any questions.
Raise your hand, we'll get a microphone.
Will, looking back at last year when Fromm threw the ball, he did take some downfield shots, but a lot of times he worked the edges. How difficult is that as a defensive back to play, especially on some of those shorter routes where he's getting rid of the ball pretty quick?
Well, most of them are RPOs, and they do a really good job, and they're very effective in last year's game with that. They've got some really good space players, and you talk about Terry Godwin, Miko Hardeman, Crumpton. I mean, they've got some really, really fast guys. And the one thing that I would say, one of the many good things that would jump out at me is their team speed overall, not just skill-wise offensively, but defensively, and it really shows up on special teams. So, but most of those were very accurate with the ball, and I don't know that Jake totally gets the credit he deserves. I watched the guy in the college football playoff against Oklahoma, made some big-time throws in that game, some longer throws down the field out, the field corner, the digs across the middle, the high-low concepts. And then against Alabama in the championship game, put them in a position to win the game. So he's very accurate with the football and speaks for itself what he did as a true freshman.
Way in the back, Mike.
Well, you said this offseason that you grew up watching, SEC football games on Jefferson Pilot, then you'd watch the game of the week. Does this seem like one of those games to you, trying to take yourself out of it? And what is your earliest memory of the Carolina-Georgia game? The second part of that question.
I would have a hard time going back. Most of the games were at night, and South Carolina wasn't in the SEC at that time. I remember James Jackson laying the ball on the ground at Williams-Brice Stadium. All right, and Georgia ended up winning the game. I think it was James. I can't remember exactly. But most of those games were at night. I think I attended a couple of the games at Sanford Stadium. But yeah, it's been obviously a great rivalry through the years, and I expect another outstanding game on Saturday.
Georgia won their game pretty handily Saturday too. How much can you learn about a team rewatching film from a game where they win by 45 points?
Well, just different guys in different spots. I think that we all know each other pretty well from a coordinator standpoint, from a play caller standpoint. There'll be some new wrinkles and some different things they've worked in the offseason, sure, that we will have as well. So, again, I think that, knowing kind of their structure and our structure and how we do things, this game has been game planned for this summer. So we're just kind of brushing up the game plan this week, and I'm sure they're doing the same.
Go in the back, Mike.
Coach, on the other side of that, what can you guys take away after playing Coastal, going up against now a very good team, one of the best probably in the country?
Well, again, I think, first of all, with young players having the opportunity to play in front of 80,000 people, that's the first big-time exposure for a lot of those young men that they'll have. So that's exciting for them. But, again, I think, just gelling together, making communication. Those are things I look for. We didn't have a lot of issues, especially on the offensive side of the ball, with communication. We're very efficient. We're very effective in the things we do with new coordinator, new play caller, some new moving parts. And I thought, in all three phases, we functioned pretty well.
Will, when you and Kirby were playing basketball back in the day, do you remember one good pop that he gave you? What's the biggest injury you ever got?
I can't go into all that. I can't even visit that right now.
How much of your decision to commit more fully to tempo had to do with specifically with the ability to run the ball against elite defensive lines?
I would say a huge part of that. And you watch teams that play with tempo and how effective they are running the football. And a lot of it has nothing to do with getting a hat on a hat in the run game. A lot of it has to do with the displacement of a defensive player, not getting a line, not having his eyes in the right spots. I just think it's so hard offensively right now unless you are just elite
Right.
from an ability standpoint to create explosive plays. In order to create some explosive plays in the passing game especially, you need to be able to run the ball and stay balanced to create one-on-ones down the field. And there's no question that was a big part of it.
Is Javon Charleston back with you?
Yeah, I meant to mention that Javon's been suspended from our team now for 2.5 months, and obviously this past week, as a consequence for his inappropriate actions in June. His case has been thoroughly investigated. During that time by the authorities, Javon's been accepted into the pretrial intervention program. I met with him on Sunday and discussed his situation at length. And after those meetings, I decided to reinstate him to the team. As long as he enters the PTI, handles his business, handles some things that I'm asking him to do as well, then we'll decide on as far as playing time and those things are concerned. And we'll decide that at the appropriate time, and that's not right now. Our players understand we've got a very high expectation for their behavior in representing the University of South Carolina, the need to handle themselves appropriately on and off the field, and there's consequences for their actions. And I really think that my track record speaks for itself on discipline. So I'm going to end it with that, and I don't have any other comment.
But Javon won't play Saturday.
I haven't made that decision yet.
Tough is it to go up against a defense like the one Kirby Smart runs, and what makes them so effective?
Well, they have good players. That's the starting block. Is you look at guys and who are we going to have a hard time blocking? Who can we win against in coverage? And then schematically, they do a really good job of taking away the things you probably do well. You're going to have to play a little left-handed at times to be able to get some plays versus them, to figure out how you can create some explosive plays, how you can challenge them vertically down the field. So I think it all starts with players. They got really good players. They've recruited extremely well, but then it goes from the coaching, schematically, the development part of it, that they do a really good job.
Well, you've coached against Georgia a few times now during your career. The first time it happened, was it hard for you to kind of separate yourself emotionally from your alma mater and look at them as the enemy? And as the years go by, does it get easier for you to do that?
Yeah, I think, it was 1995. I was a graduate assistant at Auburn. We played in Athens, and it was a little different there just because I knew a lot of the players. That was right after I'd finished playing in 1994. But, the more you move forward, your loyalties reside who's writing that check, So I'm a Gamecock.
Over here, Pete.
Well, I wanted to ask about the depth chart and then the turf. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Maybe Claude Felton's slipping. I don't know.
No.
I'm sure it didn't have anything to do with Kirby.
No.
Go ahead.
There's a chance today. You guys could get ranked in the top 25. Nothing.
We'll have zero discussion.
Okay.
If I do discuss it, it'll be a solid 15 seconds of waste of our time.
Let's go to the back, Mike.
Coach, I know you guys are taking the week by week mentality, but in the past, I know games like Kentucky, you've talked about haven't been able to beat a team in a while. Do you bring that up at all with Georgia? I know it's been a while since you guys have beat them.
No, I think every year is different, and this year's Georgia team and this year's South Carolina team are different from a year ago. And I don't know that game last year or 2 years ago or 5 years ago will have anything to bearing on what happens this Saturday afternoon. So it's about this 2018 football season and our football team that's representing University of South Carolina today.
Stay in the back, Mike.
Well, last year the Georgia-Carolina game was pretty late in the season, so you didn't have guys like Bryson and Debo. I'm wondering, just what sort of advantages playing them in week 2 instead of week 7 or 8 can bring to this football team.
No, I'm sure they had guys banged up too. At the end of the day, it is what it is. We're playing them week 2. We're looking forward to it, and I'm sure they're looking forward to it as well.
Josh in front.
I don't know how much you've seen of DeAndre Baker, their cornerback. If some, what are your impressions of him as a secondary coach?
Extremely impressed. The guy's got really good ball skills down the field. He's a very physical player as well. He's a willing tackler, but he's got really good length on the line of scrimmage. He can win on the line of scrimmage. And then he wins a lot of 50-50 balls down the field. He's got a really good knack for playing the football down the field. He's got a lot of confidence, which is a corner in our league. You know, in any league, you got to have confidence, and that's but I knew him coming out of Northwestern High School, and I think he's an outstanding player.
Do you get the sense a guy like Debo wants to play these type of guys and measure himself in that way? Do you
Absolutely.
think he'll be sort of rise to the occasion?
I'm sure Bake wants to play him. And, you know, I think that works both ways. I mean, I think that, you know, the good players I've been around, it didn't matter who lined up across from them, let's go play. You know, we'll play against the best guys. And that's, I'm sure that's being seen both ways.
Go way in the back, Joe.
Coach, I know up here, Coach. I've heard Javon and Donnell say earlier today that the big thing is being physical in this game. I know you mentioned physicality being a big thing since you got here. Do you think if your team is the more physical team on Saturday, this is kind of the almost statement game for your program?
Well, again, I think that, you know, any time in our league, and having been a part of our league as a player and a coach now for a long time, you know, winning on the line of scrimmage in critical games like this is pivotal. To be able to stay balanced on offense, be able to run the ball, and be able to throw the ball, protect the quarterback, to be able to stop the run defensively. I mean, those are all things that are critical in every game, but certainly in this game as well. And I would say it would be a big indicator of who wins the football game is who wins on the line of scrimmage on Saturday.
Back to Pete and then John.
Well, you mentioned how tempo, kind of using tempo to kind of free up some space to run. SEC teams put a lot of points and yards up on the board this past week. Is it a manifestation of something you've seen coming over the last couple of years where teams have decided, or teams have made the decision, we got to find a way to improve our offenses in a defensive league like the SEC?
I think a lot of teams played out of conference schedules, and that helped.
John.
With the athleticism on your interior of your offensive line with Donnell and Sedarius and Zach, does that give y'all more options to do some things offensively in the screen game and pulling those guys?
Sure. I mean, I think, you know, based on some gap schemes that we have based on the front and who's pulling, we think all three guys are effective guys when they're pulling. And all three guys have, you know, did a fantastic job on Rico's touchdown before half on the screen. Donnell and Sedarius both made nice blocks down the field. So all those guys are athletic and I think, you know, have continued to improve in their time here at South Carolina.
Well, you had 4 guys carry the ball for you last week. How easy is it to kind of, you know, split the carries and kind of massage the egos of that group and make sure everybody's happy?
Well, again, there's only one ball, and they all want to carry it, but I think it's a very unselfish room. That's the one thing I think through competition, it can either pull you apart or pull you together. And I think I've seen a group that's galvanized itself and pulled itself together as far as their approach and wanting us to be successful. And regardless of who's carrying the ball, let's win games, and that's been fun to watch. And I think Bobby's done a really good job of, you know, understanding those guys and understanding what we need to do to be successful.
At what point did you guys start trying to work inside or outside zone as more of a bigger part of this offense? And what about the personnel grouping you have now kind of fits that concept?
Well, it's just something we looked at in the offseason that's very difficult, especially when a lot of people are playing what I call an odd 3-down look. And in essence, it's, you know, you're covering the tackles and the nose, but in essence, it's a bare front. And it's very difficult to run the ball inside versus that front. It's very difficult unless you can just get great movement every down in, down out. So a lot of times attacking the ball in the perimeter, whether it's a toss, whether it's a stretch, or whatever the case may be, sometimes is a lot easier, you know, to run the ball against.
Back for the right count.
Keeson today said that the defensive backfield and the corners are pretty versatile and are able to do different things against different guys. How nice is it to have guys like Keeson and JC who can match up against different receivers in the nickel and outside?
Well, and I would put Rashad in that category as well. Guys that can play in the slot and they can play outside, and they all feel comfortable doing all things. So that's it gives us some variety to be able to match up, especially when you start playing teams that play with a little tempo. You don't have to worry about getting aligned. You can play right and left, and you can play a guy in the slot and feel comfortable doing that. And with all of our calls, whether it's man or zone, all of our guys can roll through those roles. So that's been very, you know, good to give us some multiple looks.
Go back, Mike.
What impresses you about Jake Fromm, and what do you think is the key going up against a guy like him this year?
Well, I think, you know, as a true freshman, you know, having been a part of this league for a long time, to see what he accomplished as the starting quarterback was pretty amazing. To go with his first start up at Notre Dame, to make a couple of throws that he made in critical situations to help win the game, it's pretty amazing. To go down the line with the bullet on your chest and you're winning the Southeastern Conference Championship, you're going to the college football playoff in that stage in Pasadena, and obviously in the national championship game. And, I thought the guy performed extremely well. So I've got all the respect in the world for him. He's very accurate with the football. He's a competitor. He obviously handles the moment extremely well, and he's got the respect of his teammates. So as far as that position's concerned, I don't know what else you're looking for.
How comfortable are you with your defensive line rotation, specifically the younger guys at the back end of it, holding up against what's maybe the biggest and most physical offensive line you'll play all
no
year?
question. Well, we're still working through that. That's a discussion that we're still kind of, muddling through this week and talking in terms of, how are we going to match up in some situations. So we're still working through that.
Will they provide, that offensive line provide the biggest challenge you'll face this year, you think, based on what you've seen thus far?
Probably. I would say so. It's a massive unit.
And with DJ Wanham, are you less optimistic than you were Sunday?
No.
There's a couple guys in here said they didn't, not that he wouldn't play, but they were kind of preparing almost or sounding like he wouldn't play.
No, I was Saturday after the game, Clint Haggard and I talked, and we were going to boot him till Wednesday, and then we're going to practice him tomorrow.
So you feel like he'll be able to play?
Sure.
A couple of the guys talked about don't flinch first. What does that mentality mean to you, and what's sort of
This is going to be
that?
a physical game, and you don't need to get in this game and start flinching. That's exactly what it says. Don't flinch. This is going to be a physical, tough game, just like it was last year, and just like it's going to be every year.
How does DeAndre Swift compare to what they've had in the backfield in the past, and do you think they're still prepared to shuffle their running backs the way they did last year with Nick and Sony?
Well, that's their call, but he's an outstanding player. He's got a big lower body. I think he's really improved his strength in his lower body. He's running through contact extremely well. He's got big-time top-end speed to finish runs down the field. We recruited him here out of high school, so I know DeAndre. He's an outstanding young man and a really good football player. And they certainly have a stable of guys, whether it's Holyfield or Terrian or Cook. They've got a good stable of backs to be able to rotate and keep fresh backs in the game. Absolutely.
So in a lot of situations, like your team has, where you start with maybe a Sun Belt type team and then have kind of a big game early in a season, people outside football programs will say they might have been holding back going vanilla. Obviously, you guys threw out a ton of wrinkles, so not really an issue here. But is that a thing that staffs actually do and staffs you've been on, hold back early in season before big games, or is that just something people outside programs imagine?
No, I do think there's a certain extent to that. But I don't think that that's something where you're holding out an entire offense or defense and you're going to run something totally different. That's not happening. And at the end of the day, they know us pretty well and we know them pretty well. There'll be a couple new wrinkles, whether it was game 2 or game 10. There's going to be some new wrinkles that you try and take advantage of based on a matchup, based on a situation. It's no different when you coach in the National Football League. You play when I was in the AFC East, we played Buffalo twice, we played New England twice. So played the Jets twice, and there's going to be some new wrinkles each time you played one of those teams, a little different. They give you something different, but there's not going to be wholesale changes of an entire scheme offensively or defensively.
Handling an offensive line like Georgia's, what's the most important part for a defensive lineman? Is it as simple as technique? Is it girth? Is it something that you as coaches do to kind of help them when you have to face an offensive line of that size?
When you got to play with a great pad level. That's number one, because you start standing up with this bunch, you're going to get pushed around. That's the bottom line. So we got to really stress pad level, really stress keeping your head in your gap. Swift and all of these runners are guys that can take it anywhere, whether it's A gap, B gap, C gap, or circle the defense. So it comes into a huge part of just doing your job, keeping your head in your gap. But I would start with pad level. You better play behind your pads or you're going to get pushed around. And our guys understand that. You got to be able to disengage and get off blocks because they're going to create a lot of double teams, and it's going to keep some linebackers flowing free. We got to be able to keep those guys free. And then when you have your one-on-ones, you got to win in those one-on-ones and disengage and get off a block and defeat a blocker. The tie goes to the offense. So we've got to be able to do those situations. But to me, it all starts with pad level. You got to have a great pad level. You start standing up with this bunch, you'll get pushed around.
Way back in the middle. Joe.
Coach, I'm just wondering, for you personally, how do you just handle everything and your mental focus and poise going into a matchup like this?
Well, I ain't worried about me. I'm worried about the guys playing. So I'll be fine. I'll be good.
Got down front here.
You mentioned kind of keeping the guys' focused. Is there a little almost extra, maybe attention is the right word, to the guys who are from Georgia? Because it always seems like those guys get maybe a little extra hyped kind of going into this matchup.
I think it's all based on the player, and this environment will be electric on Saturday, and if you can't get excited for it, something's wrong with you.
Anything else for Coach?
All righty, thank you very much. See you Saturday.